No one, not two, shape change in the nether-pool and drowned with friends, to arise anew again and again.
Makes me smile. This is nice to listen
Manifesto? That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. This is episode 6. This episode we will be discussing Charles Burns' Black Hole, the graphic novel that came out in 2005. I mean, it was released in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is a Classico Carson, Jackie, Josh episode. A Mutant Manifesto is a philosophy, arts, and culture podcast, essentially, where we are interested in themes of alterity, difference, and change. But then how do you find a grounded sense of what one should do or strive for in a context where you're radically open about what matters and also about the fact that your position will constantly be changing? How do you square constant change and non-singular identity with a need for some kind of structure? Is essentially the meta thesis of this podcast. And each episode, we also perform a collaborative writing project where we edit, mutate our manifesto that Josh read at the beginning of this episode. Given the what we find through the discussion of the day. I've been sort of doing this prompt where I ask people how they've been this week. I think a good way to kind of bring that into a more like sinuous, bring that more sinuously to bear within the context of this project. I think how does your body feel incorporates like how your emotions are feeling. And for me, it also usually, I don't know, my moon is in Capricorn, which to me is like the moon ruling emotion, and Capricorn being a very grounded, a very navigable sign, a sign that tries to keep sure footing. So for me, that's, I oftentimes like have kind of a complicated relationship to how I'm feeling, because oftentimes it gets routed through like thought and gets routed through thinking. But then every once in a while I just kind of get these surges of that type of feeling that goes beyond thought, just outside of like syntax. And when we started recording today, when we just got on Discord, I had just taken a nap. I'm feeling pretty like exhausted physically. It's been really hot in Minnesota, and there was a surprise thunderstorm today. There was like a really violent thunderstorm that lasted for like an hour, and it wasn't on the weather app at all. But yeah, I don't know why, but I just like was kind of like in tears a little bit when it was time to start podcasting here, and I don't really know exactly why, but I think that there's some, it just becomes really exhausting to just, go through the motions.
Yeah. I think you're touching on a feeling that a lot of folks are probably feeling right now. I mean, no matter where you look, there's a lot of things that we're being called to just push through and take for fact and take for like our reality. I know we talk a lot about election stuff, but also Carson and I were talking about the weather and it being really, really like weird and funky and terrifying. So climate change is like on the forefront of our minds. Like the storm is coming to DC as well. I think it's coming tonight. it's funny that you mentioned just sort of like going through the motions, because even at my work, I feel like I've been doing that for a while, and then I sort of have been drinking a little less as I try to get my life together, and it feels like I wasn't even listening to music at all today. I think I played music once when I took a shower, but I just kind of had to not play anything. And it was really weird. Like I was just kind of looking around, seeing just what was around me, trying to ground myself, I guess. I just feel like I feel a little unsettled as well, but not like anything super deep. It just feels like I saw that NATO summit stuff, and then it just kind of I don't know. Like I just feel like I actually don't know what's going on. Like I kind of feel a little confused, maybe, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you all say this because, yeah, earlier I was feeling, yeah, like Josh said, like, it's funny also that this is kind of centered around, like, I don't know, the weather lately, and, like, we keep getting tornado warnings here, um, which I don't ever remember getting, like, growing up, and, um, yeah, and that kept seeing stuff that is like, an unusually strong hurricane that went through like the Caribbean and then Texas, and um yeah, so it just I was saying that I used to really love thunderstorms in like a pretty like, I don't know, romantic, childlike way, and then lately they've been making me just kind of like, yeah, just anxious. And each time I've been at work and stuff, and like the thunder was like really, and I work at a place that has just like tons of windows, and the building's just like this kind of, I don't know, like, and yeah, I just kept thinking about if we were gonna have like a tornado, like what to do, even though it's like kind of not really, it didn't happen, or at least not that I know of. But also, yeah, Jackie, that's like a weird thing of like having like something be like a surprise that feels like it's like, uh, I don't know. Like I kept checking my weather app kind of too, and I don't like want to do that, and I don't want to like be like that, but I'm also like, yeah, for some reason today it was I don't know, that specifically was weirding me out. But on a like maybe more bodily level, I'm eating focaccia right now because yeah, I feel like I had a weird eating day, which throws me off, and um, which maybe, yeah, like I feel like is, I wish I could be more like spontaneous in my life, um, but I have to deal with like these health things that like if I don't live more like regimentedly, then I'm like, I just get thrown off and like feel like horrible. So, and I think I had like a first migraine I think I've ever had like last week. So just stuff like that where it's kind of like, yeah, which going through the motions of that is really taxing for me. Of like, why do I have to constantly worry about like eating? It's like very very it gets me down. Like, I don't know, having a body that doesn't always function optimally or whatever.
I just stabilized myself by going and having a cigarette for this, and it was like a beautiful, like the sun was coming down and it was really gorgeous, and that like post rain, like thunderstorms are gorgeous and everything. But the weather being like, I don't know, like a metaphor for the immune system in general or something, like this collective immune system or something like that. I don't know, just and then just like something that I think connects to the topic, to this narrative, this black hole, is just this sometimes you feel so like in a similar sense that we're addicted to our phones, we're also like addicted to these life cycles that are so bad. Like going to work is like so normal that you can't even see it, but it just is so bad. It just feels so bad and cuts you off from any other possibility. And I'm thinking about how sometimes, and thinking about like something Lucas Murphy said in the last episode briefly. He just mentioned this idea of like a hobo being somebody who like train hops and actually takes up the lifestyle by choice to some extent. And I'm thinking about how sometimes that feels so enticing, actually. You want an excuse or something. Like a lot of people, and maybe we'll weave this into the discussion of the book a little bit, but it's like I don't think any of us, I don't think it feels possible in a lot of ways to just like go away from it all, because we're tied up in like in ways, in the same way that we're tied to our bodies in certain ways and tied to our routines in certain ways. We're like tied to the social fabric and this ideology that keeps us in a specific kind of toxic relationship with it. And going beyond it seems kind of impossible unless you have like a break with what you're currently within. Something I've been thinking about, but it seems so enticing in a weird way to be like, I mean, I think everyone has this fantasy as well. Like, if only I could just find something else, just like, there's got to be a better way, you know, even if it means giving up so much of this quote unquote privilege or whatever.
I think I can loop that into the story to some extent, right? For reference, just loosely, Black Hole takes place in Seattle in the mid-70s. There is a sort of sexually transmitted disease that's going around, particularly in the high schools, or this particular high school that we're looking at in the novel, a graphic novel. And it disfigures those who have it in some sort of minor and others extreme ways. And, you know, there's often a question of choice, right? As, you know, sex is hopefully consensual and a choice for a lot of people. And so in this dynamic, if you have what they call the bug, people go into exile, but there's even a character that has some sort of basically maybe negligible symptoms and tries to pass in the school, right? For Carson and Jackie, this is the person with the webbed hands who one of the main characters is in a relationship with. And yeah, I think that, you know, and people, the children with, they are children, they're kind of high schoolers. The children with this bug often exile themselves to, or like remove themselves from the city and go to the woods. And some of them like can come in and out. They have passing, maybe deformities, I guess if you want to call them, or maybe features, passing features that allows them to sort of live in society, but also commune with those who also have the bug. And then some are maybe too extreme to hide. And I don't know if we want to go in maybe on the concept of choice, because that's kind of where we begin with the Chris and Rob narrative in the story. But being able to choose to remove yourself from society is pretty challenging, right? Especially when you are dependent. Like as a child, you are dependent on parents, all these other features, and to leave that behind, you have no support system, no real way to make money, if you are particularly transformed by this disease or bug, you are shunned by society and therefore unable to actually reintegrate. But if you have the choice to go between, which side do you choose, right? Especially when you see how society treats the disfigured or transformed. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that we'll naturally work our way back to these themes. Yeah, one thing before we maybe just talk about these characters and actually ground what happens in this narrative and like the art style and things like that. Yeah, just the I'm particularly interested in not just like your ability to live given your choice to leave society or quote unquote or whatever else, but also the fact that if you are comfortable enough, then you are unable to make the choice. Like you can't actually choose to do it because like you never will. You never will choose to go beyond it. Yeah, but unless you're kind of forced to, and that kind of brings up questions about like consensus as well as it complicates this idea of consent because what does it mean to live in a world like coerced consent to live a certain way, and then like these slippery instances of like is it consensual or not to have this thing transmitted to you that then kind of brings you, whether you want to or not originally, to a different type of understanding of community and of your place in the world. Yeah, it's another overarching theme. We've got passing so far, consent, both on a larger scale and a very intimate scale, and then also we have like ways of living so far, like three big themes that we're going through. But yeah, so should we go in a little bit? So it takes place. The narrative takes place in the 70s in a very like all the characters depicted are pretty much white, I believe, and they're all like middle class, and it's a Seattle town, like high school. Yeah, Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about Charles Burns at all?
Yeah. So I guess I encountered Charles Burns right as I graduated Oxy, and he himself lived in DC or had some sort of connection to DC before spending a lot of his time or not, I don't even know if it's before, but he spent a lot of time in Seattle, Washington. So it's two different types of Washington. And then I think he currently lives in Pennsylvania. He's made a lot of art and like kind of cult artwork and comic book strips for various outlets, various magazines, throughout his time as an artist. As we mentioned at the top of this episode, Black Hole was once serialized from 1995 through 2005 and then compiled in 2005 into this compendium that we've read today. And that compendium or compiled comic won the Harvey Award. There are his art style or artwork has made various cameos. I looked through the wiki at one point and there was like a failed Coke product that he did the artwork for. Like it was called OK Cola or something like that.
Okay.
And yeah, and
Okay, cool. That's
yep. It's very funny. Look it up, y'all. It's actually really cool. And then Black Hole, as the sort of compiled graphic novel, also makes a cameo in the movie. I think it's like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. That's pretty interesting when you think about this work as like about transfiguring and these apes are growing, but that's neither here nor there. Charles Burns' artwork, if we're going to talk about the visual style for those who haven't looked at it, is kind of gruesome and very detailed. There are a lot of heavy lines. There's a lot of sort of opaqueness in his artwork. I'm not a sort of art history scholar at all, but if you look through the book, it's a lot of black. Like this took a lot of ink to create. and kind of exists in darkness. But Jackie?
Yeah, this book in particular is very it's two shades. It's by there's only two colors, white and black. There's no gray. It's very interesting. And so like the shading is done through a style that is like it looks like a woodblock print or something. There are the shading is performed by lines that begin thickly and then taper into smaller, thinner lines. But there's only black and white, and one shade of black, one shade of white. Yeah, he has some inventive techniques with the paneling as well. The panels will sometimes stream nothingness through them to sort of create these sort of psychedelic effects. It's very meticulous, very realist art style, but with this mutational, with these mutations, it's a really interesting way to bring that to a kind of tactile kind of look to it.
Yeah.
I liked how it started each.
No, please continue.
Started like each of the little sections, little chapters with like a solid black page with just like one kind of object of interest or something, or one. A lot of times you couldn't tell really what it was necessarily, but it was often like kind of foreboding or hinting at something that would be in the rest of the chapter or
the first
section.
one we see is a frog splayed out, against a black backdrop, but just like it says Biology 101. That's the title of the first chapter of this.
Yeah.
And it's
like a dissected frog.
Dissected frog with all its guts coming out. This like bubbliness to the like giving the impression that it was just dissected. All the formaldehyde leaking out. Another one might be just an orange sitting there, depicted in like realist black and white.
So many different kinds of holes and slits and cuts and like wounds and I don't know, a lot of yonic shapes.
Yeah, a lot of vaginal phallic stuff for sure.
Very portal, like a portal running through the whole tome.
Yeah. If I may just introduce the first like characters through because it comes right at the beginning here. We have, let's see. It's Keith and Chris. So we start out in Keith's point of view. It's in biology, and he's talking about how he was in love with Chris, basically. This sort of high school feeling of being just infatuated with somebody. I definitely have had that experience. I don't know about y'all, but it just completely takes over your perspective in such an incredible way, and like your emotion, you fixate. Like for me, I've like fixated on people throughout my life, very strongly, and it's something that I've like only within the past maybe 5 years, or I mean, in my 20s, I feel like is when I was able to start unlearning how to do that or how not to do that. Because when you're in it is like a sickness. It just is like completely takes over your perspective. But so he's talking about this sort of like what's a word for it? There's a word for this. But this sort of obsessive love he's feeling for Chris, who is this person who you see her kind of zoning out in class. She's like, she herself is sort of like, maybe she looks like she's dissociating or something. But we see Keith narrating like, I was in love with her, blah, blah, blah. We were in this class, we got paired up together, and I was trying to like be a man and cut this frog because everyone else, I saw my other classmates like doing this thing where they were being like, ew, what, are you grossed out or something? To the girls they were with or whatever. And he was like, okay, let me try to do this. He slits the frog open, tries his best, and then basically has a queasy moment and kind of passes out. And we see this, like, through the slit of the frog, he has these, like, weird premonitions, and all these panels get enjammed together so that we kind of get to this sort of cosmic, circular zooming out, where it's a surreal thing, and it kind of goes along with him going unconscious. And then as he regains consciousness, we see all these other high schoolers' faces. And this is a technique I wanted to just point out really quickly. Where Charles Burns does this multiple times in this book, where he starts with the perspective of, he basically shows a close-up of Keith's face as his eyes roll back, he goes unconscious. And then we get the psychedelic thing, and then we see him again, lying there. And then the next page, we see the reverse perspective, where instead of looking down on him, we are now, from his point of view, looking up at all the leering faces looking down on him. Including Chris's and his other buddies. They're sort of like their faces from we see their faces from below, whereas before we saw his face from above. And he repeats this motif many times throughout the novel, where he will have one page of one perspective, and then the next one will exactly reverse the perspective. And I thought that was interesting, this passing of the narrative from one subjectivity to the exact opposite one. Yeah. But so then, yeah, that's how we're introduced to Keith, who basically we start the chapter with Keith being obsessed with Chris. And then pretty soon after, we get to know Chris a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And going off of the perspective shifts that you mentioned, Jackie, like the whole graphic novel is like that. And we're shifting between people, we're shifting between like actual states of being, right? There's a lot of intoxicants going around, etc. I don't know. I really appreciate that as a means of decentering us from the like basicness of walking from the car to another friend's house, or even the dialogue shifts. And so as we sort of go into a party scene, this is Chris sort of talking about and describing a typical high school party, but also encountering another one of our main characters, Rob. So
right, another just quick note is that, yeah, each chapter does have basically a narrator, even though the narrative does sometimes go beyond them. And the narrators alternate between Keith and Chris. Those are our two basic grounding focal points, but each one alternates between the two. So yeah, this next one is through Chris's POV at this party.
Yeah, I wonder if we want to talk a little bit about the illness itself and consent in this moment, right? Particularly because this is the first time the bug becomes a like manifest thing in the story, right? So parties going on, and we have Chris and Rob about to engage it with one another. They're leaving a party, they're sneaking away.
Yeah, just to lead up to it a little bit, like basically, like Chris at the party sees Keith, and similarly to the way that Rob, and similarly to the way that Keith was sort of had this limerant, I believe is the name for it, like limerant crush on Chris. Chris has a similar sort of feeling for Rob. This, like, you know, he's presented as like a cool guy, fits in with the other guys pretty well, you know, nonchalant, cool guy. And so she like is basically like lusting after him at this party, and then she's like moving on him and is really trying to be like, hey, let's go for a walk. Like, sort of is overtaken by this irrational, almost, you know, like desire for him. And he keeps being like, oh, okay, let's go for a walk, I guess. So she like gets him outside. They're having like wine and stuff together. And then she's like, I want to go like on a real walk. I want to go like to the graveyard. And he's like, oh, that's like pretty far away. Are you sure? And she's like, yes, let's go. She's like taken over by this like desire thing. Yeah, and then I guess just to sort of like finish the scene, they go, you know, they wander to the graveyard and they're sitting there together and they start kissing.
Yeah, they start kissing, and as they progress, there's a particular moment where Rob tries to warn Chris about him having the bug. And Chris says that she knows. And it's sort of this, like, warped, like, consensual moment where, like, we're trying to talk about sex, but we're not talking about sex. And the, like, sort of the, I guess the girl is taking the lead, and the guy is sort of trying to be not a dog or not a bad person, despite being sort of in a relationship with another person at this moment. But I don't know. It's unclear whether Chris saying that she knows about this other relationship, or if she knows about clearly doesn't know about the bug, but what she know, like maybe he hasn't had sex with that many girls or something. Like she's pushing this like interaction that he wants to have, but it's just he
Well, yeah, I
I
think
don't know, that conflation is important.
I think the precise way that it unfolds is really important because this actually does, it actually frays the, and this is a big thing, like, it frays the even understanding of what consent is. Actually, this is a moment that, so the second chapter in or whatever, and like, it really pulls that apart because, so the way that it works is that he says like, wait, there's something I need to tell you. Like, you should know. I have. He doesn't, but he doesn't complete the sentence because she says, no, I know, and like keeps like kissing him, keeps like, and he's like, oh, really? And she's like, yes, and keeps like going. So what does he mean by that? We later do realize. I mean, we do know that he's in this other relationship. So maybe she thought that that's what he meant. And that probably is what she thought. But it's actually unclear. We never really know whether she knew that he had the bug to begin with. I don't think.
Because also, I don't think that we actually knew either. Because I was just looking through.
Right.
It doesn't have anything prior to that. So, like, we, as readers, and I guess Chris, by extension, are like, we don't really know exactly what's going on, what he's about to say before she says, shh, I know, and then says, don't worry, it doesn't matter. Like, and it's just you and me, that's all that matters. Yeah.
Just to sit with that just for a second, like, this is something that, like, it really is, like, a really meaningful thing with these moments of consent because it really goes to the thing where it actually does not work if in a one night stand all the time because communication blips like this like always happen, and so like you need to, and if you have the lust mutually, then something's going to happen, so like you really need to like be able to remove yourself from that if you want to have a clear cut understanding of what consent is like between the two people, because communication breakdowns will happen like in a organic moment.
And also maybe just to add, like that the also that the juxtaposition of the clarity of if he is about to like say what he's going to say, and the like, I don't know, the perfect directness. This is reminding me of like in the Cyborg Manifesto of like, oh, it like this striving for this perfect communication that like isn't real or like is unattainable, and I guess it's funny when we also get into like what Rob's actual like mutation is as well, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, yeah, let's just complete this. This is continue on the scene here as we sort of like bring this microscopic lens to each kind of moment. But basically, Chris, because another feature about Chris is that she has this sort of, she's shown often in these sort of moments of reverie or of dissociation, one or the other, or perhaps both, where she's like lusting for this moment of just swimming out into the water, experiencing some kind of blankness. She's often drifting away from her consciousness. And she experiences this in an ecstatic way during this sex scene, where basically we are shown his like penis and she's like, I took his pants down and I like saw his cock and I like wanted it inside me. And then like it's shown like going into her vagina, and then she like has this blissed out moment of reverie where like the panels start going black and you see just her eyes like closed, and it's another one of these sort of semi psychedelic moments. And then the spell suddenly breaks and we're brought back to reality, and we see his penis again, and there was a little noise. And then we see that on the side of his neck, like right where like a hickey would be, is a little slit of like a fish-like mouth. It's described as fish-like. It's described as having a certain odor, like the ocean. And it makes a little guttural sound. And all of a sudden the moment is broken. And you see his face from her perspective with this look of shock and terror and like embarrassment, because we know that he has seen that this wasn't what she meant when she said that she knew. But yeah, so we see, so then that's where we're at in the scene. This moment of like, it was so good, and then it just breaks. And that was also like after he came, I think.
Yeah.
So like as soon as he comes, I think they both do or whatever, then that mouth makes a little sound, and then boom. It's like the post nut clarity. That's gonna be so awful, like a situation like this.
She's crying and this like says it's like everything was like cold and shitty and
mm-hmm. In these moments, or in this particular moment, like going back to what Carson mentioned sort of closer to the beginning of this episode about like openings and portals, it just like all of the scenes of all this whole scene about sex, we have the vaginal opening, we have the mouth thing, and also like transferring worlds, right, where we're no longer in the high school sort of party, we're now in the very serious realm of sort of adulthood sex problems and sex issues. They're in a graveyard, so this is like this conflation of like life and death to some extent is kind of how I fixated on this. And they're going through a social death. Maybe Keith has like a second life in this because she didn't know, but Chris is about to find out how that social
Rob,
death is
right?
going to. Sorry, yes, Rob. Excuse me. They have such basic names.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Rob is the guy with the mouth. Yeah, Keith is the one who's in love with Chris.
Exactly. And yes, I just think that this scene sort of perfectly lays out the fall of the entire graphic novel, right? Like each layer being revealed, like there is all this darkness, right? This feels like the black hole to me, right? Whether it be the things that we can't talk about, like with the mouth and Rob's actual mouth. I don't want to call the vaginal opening a black hole, but like sort of this heterosexual, and like there's no queer people ostensibly in this, so it's all heterosexual sex that's going on, and like what happens in the dark is the transfiguring moment, and this solemnity of the graveyard all felt very powerful in terms of images that you can actually see right in the graphic novel. So
the theme of like these different worlds that exist, like the almost as overlays on top of, there's like consensus reality, and then there's other worlds that you can portal between depending on different experiences that you have or different exposures to things. Like another territory I wanted to introduce is what they call Planet Xeno, which like a lot of like high school or college kids will have names for little mountains or little hangout spots So this is one of them. Planet Xeno is like a hill, a mountain that you can climb to in the Seattle area, in where like near this high school. And this becomes a place where people go to like drink beer, hang out, have parties. But also, it's a place where it's harder and harder to get to the further you climb in, and we at some point it becomes revealed to us that people who have the bug and who have visible mutations to the point where they can't fit into the very monoculture world that is the Seattle town, they become exiled to this like camp that they make for themselves. It's basically like it's a homeless encampment. They are pushed out of their homes, whether because they themselves are too insecure to face their changes, or because the society, puts such pressure and disgust on them that they can't live there anymore. So if you're transfigured enough, you will go to this planet Xeno and become, part of this homeless community up there. But it's also a place where people hang out and just have fun and stuff. And also going with the thing about the slits being these portals. There's a couple interesting like trick shots that like Charles Burns displays, where he opens up a chapter or opens up a scene through an opening like that. For example, he shows this happens with the frog, I believe. You see out from the slit in the bisected frog into the world, and then you see it from above. But he does that a couple times through these little like dolls, these like scary mutant dolls that, it's like when you chop up a Barbie and put it back together in different forms. As the kids are ambling around Planet Xeno, we start to see these figures here and there. And there's a couple times when he shows us the scene through a slit in the doll that's been carved there, or like through the doll's eyes or whatever. Just these kind of haunting, disfigured dolls.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the thing about the woods because I think it ties in with this like, this tension that I think is pretty central to this of like an exile through like choice, or like an exile as like punishment, or like as I don't know, like it's not your choice. And it's like, I thought that the woods, which I didn't actually really think about like Planet Xeno, because I think it only mentioned it like once, maybe twice, but yeah, it's just like this elsewhere that you kind of are in the story. You're always like, I was kind of lost in each time, and the characters often get lost like when they're trying to make their way through this place that's like, yeah, it's at once like described as like this woodsy like cove of like comfort, and like this very like green womb type thing, but then like where these like friends will go and like smoke weed, but then people like randomly get lost, and it turns into the kind of this like horror scene where there's these like weird doll sculptures and other like random signs of like habitation, where, and I feel like we probably have all had this experience. I've definitely had this experience where you're like walking through the woods or something, and you come across like signs of someone's been living here, like in this random place, or staying here. Like when I was growing up, I won't get too into it, but like there was woods behind our house, like a lot of woods, and at one point there was someone that had like escaped from a prison, I guess. So there's a lot of prisons in upstate New York, and there was like this person that was using like showers and bathrooms at the, I grew up at a campground, I guess I should say that, and this person was like using like showers and bathrooms, and then we ended up like finding out like this is this person that escaped from like this prison, and then later it was like we came across like this was like a month later or something, just while hiking around, came across like, oh, someone been living out here, like camping out here in the woods. And I guess the kind of this for me or for anybody else that grew up like, yeah, more in a woodsy or mountainous, but I guess you don't even need that necessarily. Like if you have your own like places that feel untouched, but then also this is like the elsewhere that people can go to as like a getting like a dropping out, like a leaving the world, but also, that's like it's like a double-edged thing. It's like, yeah, like a dropping out and forming community around like, oh, we all have like these, yeah, physical features that no longer like allow us to live peacefully in the world, but also, um, oh, I lost it. I started going into something else, but it kind of just this double edge of like, the woods as like a site of, yeah, like comfort, but also like terror and community, but also like intense isolation and, yeah.
I think one thread that I noticed while you were speaking is like Xeno is very close to the word xenophobia. And like when you're going into Planet Xeno, you're encountering that and like the uncanny, specifically when you're speaking about encountering one of the other children that has been afflicted, right? And so you see the signs of people living there. There's this eerie feeling of recognition that this is somebody's, like, I'm trespassing, but then there's also a fear of there's a danger in there, like, now that I'm trespassing, I'm liable to sort of frustration and anger. One of Keith's friends in this scene at Planet Xeno, right, destroys the tent that they come across after Keith is scared by one of the other kids in the woods. And so, yeah, I don't know if y'all wanted to take that and go somewhere with it. I know fear is another part, but, we can talk about like exile, exclusion, how that relates to the urban environment that Keith and Co are going to go back to, right?
Well, yeah, Xeno is a Greek prefix that means alien or other. um, yeah. So, but then it has that sort of like, yeah, like that high schoolish sci-fi-ification of your drug spot or whatever. But then, yeah, clearly also has these other like deeper meanings. I think that for me, the woods and Planet Xeno perform a very this whole novel can be seen as these shifts between binary perspectives that reveal a third thing. Because again, the black and white, there's no gray there. But then between them, you see the shapes come to fruition. So in a similar way, I think that we see Planet Xeno and the town as mirrors of one another, essentially. We have a community that is inclusively or exclusively inclusive in the normal human town, where basically everyone is included because everyone's the same, and everyone fits in because everyone's conforms. And then Planet Xeno is where it's the opposite of that, where if you do have this conformity, you can release it for a second in these Bacchic, parties. But then also, it's also inhabited by people that have a exclusive inclusivity. You're included there. They're actually pretty open to people. For the most part, they will, like, there are scenes where Keith is like despairing and depressed and in tears, and this circle of mutants around the campfire. He happens upon them, and they're like, "Oh, do you want like a food? Like we don't have much, but we're like making hot dogs if you want one." And they offer him this. They invite him into this sort of hospitality in this sort of space that from the exterior looks like it's going to be inhospitable and alien. So we have the alien world that's like welcoming to people no matter what they're going through. To some, and then we have the human world that's hospitable to most people unless you do differ. Yeah, but then I will say that another theme I wanted to bring up is ambivalence. It just is throughout this entire novel. everything. There is no. He just keeps shifting perspectives on everything. Not just like from person to person, or from like the interior or something to the exterior of it, but also themes too. He's always flipping this idea of like who belongs where, um, because in any community there is going to be people who fit in and people who don't, people who feel like they belong, people who feel like they don't, people that want to belong, people that don't want to. I think that's a Planet Xeno versus the town is a good like relief where you can see those two juxtaposed.
Yeah, I thought about that a lot. And I didn't land on ambivalence, but maybe like transience as well. Like there's a lot of traveling between those two spaces, right? And that's kind of where we see that ambivalence, right? Like the flipping on its head, like which society is more welcoming and which is safe. And I think because of that, you kind of end up with like nowhere is really safe, right? For anyone. And maybe if we go back into the city, for example, like if we go back into maybe some of Chris's perspectives, right? Like we have a couple of storylines where Chris is in between these two worlds, and we can get at some of these other topics that y'all have written down here, right? So Chris has now been infected, and we are at the lake. Everybody's drinking again. This might be near Planet Xeno.
Yeah, I think this is in Planet Xeno, quote unquote. Yeah,
right. Planet Xeno, broadly the woods, right?
Yeah.
She's on her period. She's sort of like really down, but the people are inviting her into the party scene. They're saying, "Hey, like, come on, let's all hang out. I'll bring you a beer. We're gonna hang out." So we all come together. There's a couple of nameless boys sort of trying to egg on and daring this other guy for money to strip down naked and jump into the freezing water. This is Seattle. It's not quite summer break yet, so it's spring. It's cold as fuck. And it's kind of like, and also you're going to jump in the water, your dick's going to shrink, people are going to laugh at you, so it's worth money. He's trying to get money out of this. And then, here comes Chris, not really saying like, what? Like, you're calling him like a jokester, a clown, dare I say pussy in this moment? I'm just going to go in. Takes off all her clothes, like, people like, oh my God. And she's like, I'm in my bra and underwear. It's like wearing a bikini, and goes in. And then we have this moment where everybody beyond, like Chris doesn't know, but everybody sees that she has sort of the quote unquote mark of the beast. She has signs of the infection as she's entering the water, right?
Yeah, there's a strip down her spine where all of the skin is frayed, is what we see. Mm-hmm. But it's on her back, so she has no idea. It's literally everyone is talking behind her. Everyone is staring behind her back. And she's like, what? Just because I'm not like fat, am I? Like, she's a couple like vapid reflections on like, why is everyone so quiet all of a sudden? But at this moment, she actually does not give a fuck because she's on her period and like high as fuck. And she's like, again, going in and out of sort of like, she's always kind of daydreaming. And she was having this thing where she was trying to get super drunk by herself before this. And so she just doesn't really care and just goes into this freezing water. Another motif for her is that she's like in love with the water. She just wants to be submerged in like a super cold expanse.
I think Chris's story, when I first read this, was my favorite. And I didn't realize going back to this how little Chris sort of is in towards the end. Like, I assumed that this was mostly Chris's story, and I was like, oh, who the fuck is Keith? But that aside, water is a narrative device in many different literary traditions to be like a transitioning period, right? And then as she returns to the shore, still no one tells her, right? We're talking about like communication, etc. No one tells her that they've seen this. But Keith enters, and Keith and co enter, and one of Keith's friends tells Keith that, hey, everybody saw that Chris is infected and you're in love with her, right? And I think at this moment, Keith goes deeper into the forest, encounters Chris, who's sort of like,
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, basically like so after she takes a dip in the water, she gets back out and goes off by her own again. She's like, I don't give a fuck. Like I'm just gonna go wander in the woods with like nothing on. And then she steps on a piece of glass. And then we switch perspectives to the guys, like Keith and his two like normal friends. And these friends are roasting him, being like, yeah, she's like, got the bug, but you're in love with her, like teasing him about that. And he's like, yeah, whatever. But he's like really feeling it. He's really feeling down about that. And then he has to go take a piss. So he goes to take a piss. And as he does, he hears Chris like yell because she stepped on glass. And then she like sees her fall over. And he's like, fuck. There's that moment where it's like, okay, now that... And he's like being really quiet. And then it's that awkward moment, which I've been in a couple times, where it's like, someone else doesn't know that you're there, but the longer you wait, and some part of you wants to like not make it an awkward situation, so like not even tell them, but the longer you wait to tell them, the worse it becomes. So it's that moment, but he also like wants to help her and also like is in love with her, so wants an excuse to go like be close to her.
I was just gonna say, well, because he's like watching her because she's naked, like in the woods at first, and then like, I don't know, he goes from this intense like experience of like, oh my I don't know, my crush has like had sex, and like he like it wasn't with him, whatever. It's like his world, like, and he's trying to like play it off kind of cool, and then like leaves, but then there she is, like, I don't know, naked in the woods, and he's like kind of like, I don't know what to do, but I couldn't like look away. Before she like steps on the glass.
Yeah. So just a quick thing, like for me that also like it again, for me that's the ambivalence of like love and infatuation, because it actually, the way that you revolve from thinking this person is like the center of your universe to being like trying to put them completely out of your mind, kind of like goes back and forth between two different starkly contrasted modalities, one of obsession and one of like trying to negate their existence for yourself, both of which are dehumanizing, quote unquote, both of which are abstractions of the person. And so just it's another example of like, when do you care about this person? And it fluctuates, it goes binarily back and forth if you have this sort of like limerant love for somebody.
But I loved that you said, like, when do you care about this person? Because right at that moment, Chris is injured, right? And he finds his, like, he gives himself license to care deeply. And like, he can mask this, right? Like, exactly, the wound that does it, he can create this facade and say, hey, I'm here to help. Let me rip off my shirt and like, like take that glass out or whatever. Mind you, like, there... Okay, I was gonna say, go ahead.
Well, it just is that it mirrors the beginning scene with the frog, because he has to overcome his queasiness with the physical body, because he has to sit there and take the glass out of her foot, and he almost goes unconscious again, and he like really has a hard time with it, but he manages to take it off, and then like bandages it with his shirt.
I'm just gonna read this. Just a couple parts real quick, because he's looking at like an open wound on her foot, and it says like, I'd seen it before, that same dark opening. I was starting to lose it, and then he's like, but I snapped out of it. I had to show Chris I could take care of her, that I'd be there for her.
And he plunges into the slit in her foot and pulls out the glass, which, I don't know. That was very sexual on this second read, and it's an exchange of fluids with her blood, etc. And it like, I don't know, like it. I think after that he mentions about how like now like she's mine, like we've become bonded in some way, right?
But you see like his bloody hands, and he's like, she has to be mine, like it's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like that's what
it's like a very murderous.
No, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have you guys ever had the experience of like when you were younger or whatever, someone you're in love with who maybe doesn't feel the same way about you, like a hair of theirs or something gets left behind or whatever, or like maybe they did like get a cut and they're like a little piece of. Have you ever had the experience? Because like, or even if it's their lipstick on a glass or something, like, and they leave and then like that part of them is there. There's something about like that little part that's usually a refuse, a piece of refuse of them that becomes something like almost
or
sacred
like
for your little obsessive mind.
like a warm spot where someone sat or
Yeah.
something.
I mean, I had that with someone's scent. It was like, oh, I know what you smell like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is like this scene at the lake is a moment of transition for both Chris and Keith, our two main characters, interacting at kind of early on in the graphic novel, and it happens sort of like when we're in society. It happened once, and it was a failed experiment. In Planet Xeno, it happens again, and it's a successful one, but both of them are transferring into different forms of themselves as they sort of. Chris is like, I'm growing up now, and or sorry, no, Keith is like, I'm growing up now. Chris is saying that like, oh, like it doesn't know, but has sort of begun the transformation into the mutant, and both of them are now about to re-enter society transformed. As they enter society, this is sort of now the intermingling has happened, right? So the intermingling has happened. We have now reached the point where the bug is actively affecting our main characters' lives, and we're now going to sort of pivot into someone who is not infected but is now like sort of navigating that space. So going off of as Chris sort of re-enters society, Chris is sorry, I keep mixing up their names. This is not Chris, this is Keith. Keith, another plosive, monosyllabic. So we're following Keith right now and his like really annoying fucking friends. But one of them is sort of this glasses wearing kind of jerk of a friend, but has a connection to these college kids who Keith keeps calling burnouts often throughout the graphic novel. But this is where not only does Keith get his sort of fantastic weed from, but we encounter another pivotal character, Liza. And Keith happens upon her by accident, sort of getting beers for the folks as they're trying out this weed that they're about to purchase. And this is the first person that is, I think, outwardly welcoming, like actually is trying to connect one-on-one very directly with an individual. I've seen people try in the rest of the graphic novel, but nothing as sort of intimate, like truly intimate, besides maybe other moments of Chris and Rob, but that feels sort of tainted by the fact that Rob is maybe a little bit detached, but we'll get into that later. What Keith notices, though, when we get to Liza, is that she's naked from the waist down, and that is where he notices that she has a tail. And so he's conflicted, maybe attracted to this tail, and Liza continues to sort of bring him in and bring him closer. And as she's bringing him in, we can tell that she's on something, and we get down into her room. So we're sort of going down into the depths, and we see her artwork. Her artwork is pretty bleak. It's pretty dark in theme. But she doesn't, she seems to have this like sense of calm, but that might be drug induced as well. And he is now sort of understanding that this is maybe a sexual encounter. Hasn't had sex with anyone before. He's sort of like hooked up with people at parties, but nothing as grand as this. I think. Do you all have any sort of ideas or like maybe themes that you could attribute to Liza and maybe even this drug house as a whole? Because it does seem like a separate third space, but it's kind of the arena where we encounter Eliza, and sort of this, like, she's almost an animal in many ways, like sort of relegated to the basement, and there's some pretty troubling things that happen to her as well. So
well, I will say that I found this scene actually very impactful. I thought this was really like beautiful, and also, but you know, again, ambivalent to me, like moment of connection, because she's like tripping or whatever. She's tripping, and but at the same time, it's connecting with Keith very directly, like you said. And I thought it was really beautiful the way that he, after like she like pushes this pipe on him and like is like, oh, smoke this like crazy weed. I thought it was really beautiful the way that he described looking at her art, which is like a bunch of macabre art. It's in a kind of different style than Charles Burns, and I'm really impressed by Charles Burns' ability to channel a different style, like imbue her with like her own art style. But it's like all these like creepy mutants. And Keith's narration goes like, it was all there. Somehow she'd figured it out. She knew exactly what she was doing. It was amazing. And then there's this moment where he tries to tell her what it meant to him, but he said he couldn't actually say it. He said, God, these are so good. They say so much. They're right there. I wish there was something I could do like this, but... And then he drifts off. He isn't able to articulate what this is, but he's transported and moved by this art really deeply. Yeah. But the thing is, like, they're both, like, at this point, high as fuck, so it's a moment of true connection, but it's also kind of, again, a little bit ambivalent, because there's this filters of, like, does he really want to be there? Because he was, like, dragged down there a little bit by her, and, like, is she, like, okay? Like, is she able to, like, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. Like, she had this vibe of, like, one, I thought she was, like, a lot older. Maybe, I think she is. But she's, like, this, like, real, like, standalone, like, admirable person. And, yeah, I thought it was really, like... I also thought it was really endearing, but also kind of, like, man, I was getting, like, nervous during their, like, interactions. I was feeling, like, a real... intense, like, giddy, like, nervousness, because, like, yeah, like, he's kind of, like, being guided through or pressured through this interaction, but, like, he is liking it. He's, like, simultaneously, like, I don't know, and I think the tale is maybe, like, actually something good to focus on, of, like, I don't know, like, it's kind of, like, bewildering, but he, like... I think it's kind of like he likes it. Like it like maybe turns him on, and she like that gets brought up, I think, where she's like, you saw my tail, like, and like you liked it, didn't you? And it's this very like sexy thing. Yeah, I don't know. And I also really liked reading like how he was like so just enamored and blown away by her, but also just like, I gotta get out of this like weird scenario. Like I'm uncomfortable, and like, so like he leaves that time. I'm pretty sure.
Well, because the drug guy, the like owner of the house or whatever, comes down and like interrupts them, and it's like, oh, I see what's going on, and Keith is really insecure and is like, wait, no, we weren't doing anything, and he's like, oh, don't worry about it, it's all good. Yeah. But that's breaks the spell, and then he's like, okay, I gotta go, and Liza's like, oh man, okay, I guess so. If you want to go, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this. I mean, there's a sort of latent queerness in the way that these bodily mutations actually become sites of both insecurity and fetish at different times. That I think is yeah, both with the tail and also with Rob's mouth. Chris's lover, Rob, his mouth is also something that people are disgusted by at certain times, but at some point also Chris, actually there's a very queer scene where Chris like kisses that mouth, his second mouth, which is much like going down on a girl or something, the way that is presented. and the way that like the sensation of having it kissed for the first time like makes him like shiver and stuff. And similarly, Liza's tail is sometimes shown as almost a phallus because it sometimes is
these
shown
are very
in dream
like
sequences.
intersex.
Yeah, they're both of them are kind of the queer, like a little bit like the very sexy woman with like a tail that is shown as a phallus, almost like entering someone's vagina potentially. And then like vice versa, the mouth, the second mouth, that is like a very sensitive thing that like somebody kisses for the first time, and he has like such an incredible experience like having that be kissed for the first time.
I also just wanted to point out that in this scene, Eliza is behind Keith in this moment. So not only is she in a dominant position, but her tail is sort of like, as Burns uses the sort of like the gutters, that trick with like the wavy to try to like get a sense of like what they're imagining. Keith is like sort of going in between images of Chris, but also then Eliza, and like Chris is maybe feminized, but then Eliza comes in and it's sort of this like, oh, like, you know, this penis is sort of approaching my opening. He's about to lose his virginity. So it's interesting that Keith is like feminized in this way. I think it's kind of like nice. It's a little, I think it's how, when you said that, like when the embarrassment comes in, I think this is where I think that not only is Keith embarrassed at being around sort of this maybe queer scene, but also that people will now know that Keith has interacted with someone with the bug as well, which also puts him in a precarious position. But he's maybe choosing this, as you'll see later on.
Yeah, the scene was hot as hell.
It's hot as hell. Like we'll
This was
we'll
a sexy scene. It was great.
Can we just do like a let's do like a quick overview? So basically, let's just like continue the plot kind of quickly here, like if you don't mind. So basically, I just want to go over like basically what happens is Chris and her lover Rob become very close, and they both have the bug, and there's this sort of like they actually they say that they love each other at some point, but like the more they get close, the more that Chris is pushed out of her normal life. So basically we end up to this point where like the two of them, well, Chris like runs away from home because she is like too ashamed to come out to her parents that she has this bug. So she escapes she basically is given a place in the woods with Keith's friend or like acquaintance, Dave, who is this guy who has like feline features because of his mutation. So he offers her a place in the woods, a tent that she's living at, and Keith visits sometimes. Meanwhile, after like some back and forth, basically, wait, that was Rob and Chris in the woods, right? Rob is going in between because he can pass, but Chris exiles herself. Is like, I'm not going to come out to my family. I'm going to run away. But yes, so like all this happens, and then basically just to zoom along, at some point, Keith is like still trying to kind of like help out Chris, and like is friends with all these mutants in the woods, and at some point offers her a place to stay because his like folks are out of town or something. He's like neighbors or whatever. He's like taking care of their house. So at one point he actually tries like one last attempt to like kind of like win her over in a way.
I do want to take this beat to also bring us back to the Chud episode, because this is the moment where Keith brings in the outside people inside and conflict arises, right? Like we now see the sort of maybe the burden of bringing outside people inside, and a lot of the plot maybe tornadoes around that. But I just want to put that little note here, and then this is also where like as the storyline bows out, it starts to reconnect. And I'd say storyline meaning both Keith's storyline and Chris's storyline. They bow out and then they reconnect after a couple of events. And so something pretty I don't want to spoil it, because this is the part where I was like, okay, people need to read this to enjoy it. But something really like bad happens that's centered around this house that Keith has brought everybody into, and we have this sort of like exile theme extreme happen where Keith starts to run away, and runs away with Eliza, and they're just heading south. We have the moment where Chris is now sort of like hitchhiking across the country, or like not across the country, but going to the beaches that she knows that she took Rob to at one point where they hung out. Carson?
I just think we missed like maybe a major part is that like Rob disappears and then Chris enters like a depression era, where then Chris kind of fades in, yeah, like in the story.
Eventually, we get to Keith and Eliza. They start running away. They head south to kind of the middle of nowhere. Their relationship starts to grow, and they have these very beautiful moments on a mountainside. And then there's, Rob disappears in this sort of as part of the cycle of this bad thing that centers around the house. And Chris goes into a depression, and begins to sort of has been declining throughout the graphic novel once Rob disappears. But then at this pivotal moment, it's where she's heading towards the beach by hitchhiking, is kind of like the only mention of sustenance we get from her is about alcohol, and she's like, this is like the little bit of vodka I've left, but it'll survive me. And then we get to the beach scene, and maybe we'll stop there, right? Like, I think that this is a particularly powerful scene. I think, Jackie, you wanted to mention something about it, but it's back to the water, right?
Yeah. There is a moment. There's the friendly-looking older woman who stops by and sees her sprawled out. It's like nighttime. Sees her lying there and says, like, "Hey, you all right? We're having a bonfire over there if you want to come hang out." And Chris, once again, it's this question of, will she rejoin this normative society? She's able to pass. Will she do it? And she says, "Thank you. I appreciate that." But then, like, there's something about, because of her experiences, she's wondering if she can do that, given what she's been through. And she kind of ambivalently, once again, is like, maybe I will at some point. I don't know. Like, go hang out with these friendly people at this fire, the warmth of their fire. But she puts it off. We don't know. She doesn't know. We don't know. And then she just decides to step into this frigid, cold Seattle water that she's been there with her lover before, with Rob before, but now it's just her. And she just like steps into this like frigid cold water and just swims out. Just keeps swimming out into it. And that's the end that we see. We see her swimming from above, submerged in this black water, and then we reverse the vision once again to see the stars. Just the stars against a black night. The last page is just like 2 blank full pages of stars. No panels, just like a bunch of stars. So it's this sort of expanding out into celestial nothingness. And then there's the cosmos that's just seen with no panels. So like her kind of, yeah, it's again ambivalent. We don't know what that means exactly. But it could be like a suicide attempt. And it could also just be like she's been doing this whole time, just continually releasing her consciousness as sort of like therapeutic practice. And will she rejoin society? Will she like decide to come back and like reunite with her family, reunite with people, or not? We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to be a little corny, like, I think she sort of identifies the black hole, like being sucked into either of these worlds and feeling sucked, like the poles of both. And as the person who, like, her mutation is that she sheds her skin, right? Like, she's literally being ripped apart by these two worlds that are seemingly infinitely dense, right? And going back to Jackie's point about ambivalence, sort of exists in the liminal space between them. And again, we don't know how that ends. It's poetic, but it's also really sad to see a broken girl sort of choose nature as an escape, but have to be subject to the violence of, I guess, the natural, the law of nature, I guess, if we want to bring, I guess, Locke into it or whatever. But yeah.
I think she really resonates with the mutant manifesto that we have so far. No one, not two, shape change in the nether-pool and drown with friends to arise anew again and again. But to me, she represents specifically the drowning. She loves the drowning part, and I think I sympathize with that. Like, again, like, sometimes you don't, if you keep respawning into the world where you have to go to work and pay your bills, it just is it gets to so frustrating. It's like playing Elden Ring, but you're at the Stormvale Castle again and again. You keep getting fucked up by those knights. It's like if you just face the same, but it's like you can't get out of that. There's no open world there. It's just that hallway. I think that it's really beautiful and nice to linger in the drowning part of our manifesto. The part where you're just drowning. But the thing is, we keep getting resurrected, and like little zombies that have to go to work, and we actually have to go through that. We have to live through that. And it's like the making live in a certain way is like really getting to me, I think, sometimes you wish that you could die in a more meaningful way. Not just literally, but also like in our metaphorical manifesto. Sometimes I wish that I could die and actually come back in a changed world. But like, it just, and so I think this is so cathartic to see her just to meditate on that last part of just swimming into the cold ocean by herself. She's not with friends, but she's just diving in. And like, there's something really beautiful about that you just kind of wish you could linger in, but none of us will. We have to continue living our lives, I don't even know. But there's something really beautiful about that moment, that just is this release of these constant like tensions of like back and forth between different modalities. At the end, he just leaves it on that open-ended note. It's just kind of nice to hang out in.
Yeah. I think maybe that scene also brings up, as you mentioned, Jackie, this sort of death, but that brings in my little fears involving the mutant, where when you become sort of more, or allow yourself or submit to being subject to the toxins around you, do you let yourself become irreparably changed, and where's choice in that? That's kind of linked to the Cyborg Manifesto, but that's just kind of what it leaves me with. Like, maybe I'm too afraid to drown in the mutagenic pool, or I'm trying to get to the point where I'm allowing myself to drown in it, so that the again and again is less onerous and maybe Groundhog Day like,
I think maybe something that I was thinking about that has to do with the ambivalence, and like I something that I had written down was like the casualness of kind of the whole thing, of like it feels like extremely apolitical, this whole story. Like, it kind of is just like a regular like teenage like coming of age story, and like I didn't even read that many like biopolitical things into it. It was kind of just like, oh, like also the people who had the bug were still, maybe this is just dumb, but like they were just still like normal people, and um like yeah, they were on their own off in the woods and stuff, but like I think that they still just did like regular nice things together. I think it's funny, like for some reason I'm thinking about hot dogs, because there's like hot dogs that came up like multiple times in the story as just like this easy basic like sharing of like this cheap accessible like but also like gross meat. I don't know, like
Yeah.
there's something, and yeah, at the end the older woman like invites her to like have a hot dog, and something that I was, that stayed with me was like, me being Chris, like floating out into the water, like knowing that I had the option, that knowing that there was like people that cared, people that like would extend their love to you even if you were, like mutated. And yeah, I thought a lot of that was really beautiful.
Yes, I think something that you were mentioning is really important to me too. Okay, you said it's kind of apolitical, but at the same time, what's funny about it is that this sort of metaphor or metonym of the bug can be applied to so many different, and also the action that Josh wanted to save for spoiler reasons. All these different the conclusions of this novel, they actually prismatically refract so many different sociopolitical things. There's the AIDS crisis. There's like school shootings. There is like latent queerness. There's like whiteness and like alterity, conformity. All these different things, like sex phobia. All these things are layered in there in so many different ways. But at the same time, no matter what group you're in, whether it's the drug house, the lake, Planet Xeno, one person's house, another person's house, the party, there is still just this sort of banality, and that can be good or bad. This banality of like the connection with other people, where you're sitting around the campfire having hot dogs, but some people have violent urges. Or you're all sharing a beer together, but someone gets too drunk. Or you are, your family loves you, but doesn't want you to have sex. Like, all of them have this sweetness of just having. Liza shows Keith how to make the perfect sandwich, which is like a layer of like salami or like something, and then just like some mayo on white bread. That's it. But so just like these simple, wonderful things that you get combined with like the dirtiness of it all, just the kind of rancid banality of it as well. Like every scene kind of has this ambivalence that I think is just how it is. Like if you break out of consensus reality, if I lived out my fantasy and like went out to the woods or, just drove, because sometimes I'm like, what if I just like forgot about this house that I'm living in and just like drove away with my savings? I could live maybe like a couple years, then you get your own irritants that come up like again and again. You get your own things that become your daily grind. There's always that work of just living through the day that's going to be there in any context, I feel. And I mean, it's not to say that there's not things that we should absolutely try to resist, but about like the terrors of this current age. But like in any situation, I feel like there's always this itchy banality and this ambivalence of community where you have this beautiful love around the campfire, then you also, by the same token, always have something poisonous there too.
Yeah. I think also maybe this. I was just realizing this. That like the connection to like like American history wise of like this is like a very 70s, like post 60s, after the fall of the utopian like dreams of the 60s and entering into like the Nixon era, Reagan era, like and I think it actually even said it explicitly. It was kind of like we were no longer like hippies, but we weren't sure like what exactly to move on to. So like goes from, I don't know, like this kind of campfire like wholesome. I'm thinking about like, it's a simplistic view of the 60s, but I feel like because this was written like after the fact, like 20 years later, it does read really like a very 70s like cultural like, and I think also very like it would be interesting to hear like people from like the Pacific Northwest like have like talk about something like this of like some sort of regional time like based identity like in that part of the world, and but like this banality of the 70s maybe of like, well fuck, like everything that we like wanted to do died, like the war in Vietnam is like raging, and like we're moving into like realms of, I don't know, like capitalism that like I don't know, or like
Yeah, I mean these.
different.
Yeah, they're trying out different ways to escape, but each escape, if you try to drop out, then you get burnt out. If you try to conform, then you lose your soul. If you try to like rebel against the normalcy too violently, then you're just a crazy terrorist who no one relates to, and you like cause a lot of true horror. Um, but at the same time, each of these different approaches have glimmers of something potentially. You can try them out.
But I feel like that's the malaise though. It's like the malaise and depression of like coming of age, like as like a teenager. I also was thinking about coming of age, like what the hell does that mean? And I kind of wanted to like, I don't know, because maybe like you could read a lot of different political things onto this, but it did just kind of feel like it was like teenagers like becoming adults, and it was kind of, I don't know, like it felt like the death of like childhood, the death of like the warmth of, I don't know, like the world, and you're seeing all these openings and going through these portals, and like the traveling through those is like this nothing, this like, which could be comforting but could be horrifying, like the actual transit process. So, I don't know. So yeah.
Well, and just to add in, but I think that sort of rough part of the transit process, I think, is, or at least how I've been digesting what like becoming the mutant is, it's like the pursuit of new life constantly. Like you're always pursuing the thing, and like if you're gonna drown, that's a brutal process, right? And there is brutality mixed into that, but there's sort of this almost pseudo-religious, you're gonna come back again, but you're not coming back again to heaven. You're coming back again to more brutality, more possibility, different options. And so like sifting through all of that is, I think, inherently painful, but also like you grow from that and you get stronger through that that pain or that conflict in many ways. I don't know, maybe I'm trying to cure my fear right now.
Well, I think that your fear is actually important to discuss, because your fear of it being without choice, I think that this is a constant. It's an alchemical process, and for me, that means like you are accounting for your circumstances truly, and that's the part that you don't have choice over, and you have to be like meditatively aware of all the different like of what you are, which is mutant, like it, and then your circumstances, which are constantly changing. There is no stable thing there. But then the manifesto part is where I think it matters to have effort, like you're sort of saying. And I'm kind of honestly inspired by your Elden Ringification of this process, because it seems like, I don't know. I feel like Josh and I mean, not to be super fucking whatever, but like I feel like Josh and Carson, you kind of both give me kind of a hopeful approach in different ways. Like I see, Josh, I see you like at least attempting, trying in a very like kind of a way that is principled and that where you have like goals that you set out actively and that you it seems like you have rules for yourself and structures that help you with the sort of discipline essentially that helps give you meaning as you go through this life. And I feel like Carson has more of a like has more of this sort of like Taoist approach where you are able to accept what is and be kind of equanimous with it despite your own like struggles and pain within it. I feel like that sort of combination of like just accepting what is and being like, okay, I just have to accept this because that's what's going to make it better is by just accepting it. And then the other one of being like, let me try to do something. Let me like attempt to actually organize myself in a certain way where I have an objective in mind and I will accomplish it. That combination between like accepting what is and letting it be and then like attempting to change it, attempting actively to like design something.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was nice. I hadn't thought about that. Maybe this goes in line with what you're saying of like, because also we didn't bring up that like the end of the narrative for Keith and Liza is in the desert where there's its own version of nothing, and it's also the place that you can see the stars like most intensely. So you have the nothing, and that's what allows you to see like the beyond. And so it's like, yeah, like the clearing, and then the space, and then the beyond, and that's when you have the vision. That's when you, I don't know, and that's like so it was like I liked how it went from the forest, from this very like fertile, whatever, like cozy and homey, but maybe that's just my own like putting that on it, to like it bifurcates to the sea and the desert, and then like but from both the sea and the desert are the stars and the beyond. So
and that void, that nothingness really does unify all, unifies both of them. And also I wanted to mention just like it was really impactful to me, this idea that the person that you love or you think you love, that you're enamored with, it doesn't work out with. And then you find something else though. Like Liza and Keith have a relationship that's beautiful in its own right, but it's not the same kind of enamored, obsessive love. It's a different thing. And then, so I really thought it was beautiful how like love doesn't work out the way one intends it to, but you find it in other ways. And that's definitely a principle of love, I think, is that you can't force it and that it doesn't work out the way that you want it to. And that exactly is, again, another, I think love itself is very mutational, love is what allows this process to work, I think, this process between like acceptance and attempting.
Jackie, I think that was a beautiful way to close out the episode. Do we want to add anything to the manifesto?
Something about the difficulty of love would be good, or like attempt either trying love or something.
Wait, hold on. What did we? No one not to love through shape change in the nether-pool and drown with friends to arise anew again.
Oh, that's nice.
Love through.
Yeah.
Love through.
Right,
yeah, because that's the through. That's the through the slits
Through
through
line,
the
right?
through the black hole. Yeah.
It also makes sense between not to, like no one, not to. There's something about that love through, like that sort of question of who is the self, who is the other. Okay, thank you everyone very much for joining us on episode 6 here. Yeah, some complicated, complex. I wish we had another 3 hours to talk about it, but I really appreciate you all listening and lending us your attention and being in this pool with us. I've been really inspired, not just by my co-host, but also by the fact that this is a process that is reciprocated by other people and people are giving us feedback. I really appreciate that. And engage with us on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Mutant Manifesto. Rate us 5 stars on the Spotify app. Tell your friends about it. If you're interested in collaborating in any way, please let us know. Through Instagram would be the best way to do it.
Read Black Hole by Charles
Please
Springs.
do.
Black Hole. Any last plugs?
I mean, if Kids is another great movie that I think ties into Black Hole really, really well, specifically about AIDS. So that's all.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one as well. Well, should we do our collective verse here? Okay. No one
No one.
not
Not to.
try to
Try
love
to love through.
shape change
Shape
in the
change
nether-pool.
in the nether-pool.
In the nether-pool.
Drown with friends.
Drown with
with friends.
To arise
To
again.
arise.
Rise anew.
New.
Again
Again.
and again.
And again.
And again.
Kisses.
You were standing in the corner like you always do, lighting up your cigarette. You'll stop smoking for your lungs go black. You say that you've known it for years, the beach could drown in flames. Do you want to keep your last name? When you wanna go, I'll go. When you wanna swim, I'll swim. When you wanna dive, I'll dive. When you wanna give, I'll give. When you wanna go, I'll go. When you wanna swim, I'll swim. You save yourself a French country Latin beach on the 5th. You kick yourself when you cry. You could say what you want to me. Your boyfriends have girlfriends. You say you can't keep track of time. When she says it's been 6 months and you aren't even trying. You say I love you. You say I love you, but you don't mean it. You say I love you. You say I love you, but you don't. You say I love you, you say I love you, but you don't even mean it. You say